Before I start, here's a bit of context to my story. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook its collar into a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house, so he can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we'd noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to bed. I hook him up to his line, close the door, unlock it, before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and side of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door, which is how my dog signals he wants to come inside. So I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch. This one louder than the last. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband to let him know what's happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but says that he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make as little noise as possible, to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere, and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel they would take me seriously, since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the peephole and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police and we went out looking for our dog. It turns out this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbour's backyard, which is where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened. We've since moved to a new house, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. This happened just this weekend, and I realized it was the first time I've really felt creeped out by a situation or a person. With that being said, some friends and I were sitting around at a cafe and drinking coffee. At around 9 PM, we decided we were bored and to do something different besides loiter behind the cafe smoking an unhealthy amount of cigarettes. We thought it would be a great idea to walk around a cemetery. So, we did just that, but found it was just as boring as sitting behind the cafe. It wasn't as spooky as we hoped. One of my friends mentions a forest near where we lived that is known to be haunted, so we decided to go. Ironically, of course, we really weren't in the mindset to deal with what we experienced. So, we head out to the area in separate cars and regroup in a parking lot in the small town that the forest is located in, and proceeded in a single car. We drive down this dark, winding road, guided only by my friend's memory, and we never really find the place where we're looking for. We feel disappointed for driving a good half hour to get there and not really getting to experience a haunted forest. We decided to stop at a nature reserve trailhead that was listed online, so we at least got something out of the trip. It is about 10:30 PM at this point. The ramp down to the parking lot is closed, so we park in front of the gate and we just walk around it. We head down the ramp and comment on how many stars we can see. Once we get to the bottom, there is a dirt parking lot and an information building that is closed. The only light coming from the building is a deep red light. Why they would use red light bulbs is beyond me, but it kind of put us in a weird state of mind. We could hear running water, but we didn't dare venture down the trail to check it out. We walked up to the building and checked it out. Nothing too interesting. We walked around it, and nothing interesting again. At that point, we decided to leave. As we were walking away, we hear rustling coming from the bushes. So we turn around, and it stops. This really reaffirms our decision to leave, and we start walking again. Then, the rustling starts again, and we turn around. That's when we notice a beam of light shining on the ground from the bushes. It's a flashlight. That's when a man steps out of the bushes and directs the flashlight at us. He appears to be moving it back and forth, looking us over as if he was pointing at something behind us. The interaction goes as follows. Me: "Holy shit, man, you really scared us." The man doesn't say anything for what seemed to be an unusual amount of time. He then says, "What are you kids doing down here?" My friend replies, "We were just looking around." The man doesn't speak for, again, what seemed to be an unusual amount of time, constantly keeping the light in our eyes. My friend then says, "Well, we were just, this area is closed." That's when the man starts slowly approaching us. I'm really too creeped out to speak at this point. My friend says, "Hey man, don't come any closer." The stranger stops. He then says, "I'm a police officer." From what I could see myself, the man didn't seem to be wearing a uniform of any kind, not even a ranger uniform. He seemed to be wearing jeans and a long sleeved shirt. I say, "Where is your car?" The stranger replies, "It's by the gate." That's when I knew something was wrong. There was no car by the gate, let alone a police cruiser. The man also came from the bushes on the opposite side of where the gate was. I mouthed at my friends the word "run," and we did just that. We booked it up the ramp and jumped in the car and locked it. We immediately started the car and reversed and peeled out onto the road. Just after getting back onto the road, we passed an old, beat-up car sitting perpendicular to the road. Immediately the car's lights turned on and it pulled out onto the road behind us. It would get really close and then pull away and flash its light, and it was honking like crazy. We went faster and faster, but it kept up the whole time. Once the small town came into sight, the car just stopped completely right in the middle of the road, and we watched it as it got smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. I'm still really unsure what happened. Maybe it was a person trying to scare us, but I'm not sure if I really want to know what he was up to, if that wasn't his intention. When my dad was growing up, my great-grandparents lived in a small farming town in Illinois. For the most part, the town was quiet and peaceful. In the mid-80s, a friend of my great-grandmother, Gina, came to her with the news that one of her sons had turned up dead. He had gotten involved with drugs and it was suspected that a gang tracked him down. The police weren't getting anywhere, so Gina decided to investigate the murder herself. One night in April, a few months after Gina's son was killed, Gina was found dead in a field. According to my great-grandmother, Gina was very close to cracking the case. However, the death was ruled a suicide by local police, and everybody moved on. Everybody except for my great-grandmother. Great-grandma knew pretty much everything about the case, as Gina had continued to update her as she tried to solve it. So, she picked up where Gina left off and began asking folks around town if they knew anything. One night, my great-grandparents came home from a day in town. Great-grandma went into the house and almost immediately heard the phone ringing. Not thinking anything of it, she picked up and answered. On the other side of the line was a man who said, "If you don't mind your own business, you're going to end up dead in a field like your friend." The next day, my great-grandfather bought his first gun. Looking back, it's creepy to think that the man on the phone called so soon after they got home. I am glad that my great-grandmother stopped searching and that my great-grandfather took precautions in order to protect his family. Both of my great-grandparents lived long lives, and Gina's husband ended up remarrying and moving out of state. When I was around 14, my family home got broken into. My mother was never able to get over the terror and disgust she felt over strangers violating our personal space, so we moved to a newer home a few blocks away. Our new home was big and safe and had a security system. The only feature of this security system that we ever used was the electronic door lock, which came equipped with a passcode. My parents are of an age where it's more important for a password to be memorable than it's for it to be secretive and secure, so they set the code to be the last 4 digits of our home phone number. Now, this was back in 2004, so phone books were commonplace, and literally anyone who had access to phone listings could have matched up our phone number to our address. The first 8 years or so living in that house were fine. We never gave our passcode out to anyone, but now that the danger was out of our minds, we also never thought to change it. In 2012, my family bought a cabin and subsequently spent many summer weekends, weeks and sometimes months up there, with my dad coming back into the city for work. Being a 22-year-old girl with a healthy social life, I rarely joined them on their cabin trips away, instead opting to throw small parties with close friends. I should note here that none of the parties that I held never resulted in strangers arriving in my home, and they were all with close friends who I trusted not to make a mess of the place while my family was away. Every time my family was away and I was in the house alone, I felt extremely tense and very freaked out. I often coerced friends and boyfriends into staying over, but even the days spent alone would get to me. The problem was the noises I would hear, often sounding like someone was still home, walking around upstairs and running the water in the sink. Sometimes I would open a door only to find it closed. My cat was constantly on edge, which I chalked up to my whole family being gone and silence making her nervous. One specific incident occurred late one night in 2013. I had actually moved out by this point, but often returned to pet sit while my family was away. Both of our family dogs were home and my cat had been sick for a few times that evening, so I decided the best course of action would be to stay overnight and keep an eye on her. I went upstairs to my former bedroom, and after an hour or so of playing on my phone and tossing and turning, I fell asleep. I hadn't been asleep for long when I was jolted awake by the sound of my dogs barking from upstairs. They're easy barkers and my first instinct was to feel frustrated with them for interrupting my sleep. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like footprints thudding up the basement stairs, and I paused. I didn't hear another sound, so I left my bedroom to investigate. I got to the top of the stairs and noticed that the front door was wide open, and there were small bits of dirt and mud on the floor, as though someone had walked in with dirty shoes. After this incident, I absolutely refused to stay at my parents' place overnight. My friends and family chalked it up to a prank, and my brothers both claimed ignorance. My mother in particular went so far as to tell me that it was probably just my overreactive imagination, and that I had not closed the door properly or something. Things quieted down as I spent less and less time alone at my parents' place. In fact, everything was fine until the spring of 2015. My family went out of town for a weekend and took all their pets with them. I was still in the city Friday night, but left on Saturday to head out on a small road trip. On Sunday, I received a frantic text message from my mum asking me if I had stopped by the house at all before I had left. I said no, and then she told me that when they had arrived home, every single light in the house was on. She said the living room appeared lived in, with a dirty dish and a half-empty water glass on the coffee table. She said that the basement door was wide open, as was the door to my old bedroom, and that the bed appeared to be messy and unmade, which was odd considering it was a guest room that rarely anyone ever used anymore. It is worth noting here that my mother is a bit of a clean freak, and would never leave a dirty dish out before leaving for the weekend, or neglect to turn off the lights. She also would have never left the bed go for more than a few hours unmade. In fact, this incident terrified her so much that she finally took my initial advice and changed the password for the front door to something more obscure. Everything was back to normal for a while. I even watched the house while my family was gone a few times that summer. Then, one weekend came up during which my family was at the lake and I was unable to check up on the house due to a hectic work and social weekend. We asked a trusted neighbor to keep an eye on the place and let us know if he caught any suspicious activity. A couple of days later, he approached my parents to tell us that while we were gone, there had been no suspicious activity. No suspicious activity except that their son had pulled up to the driveway in his silver car and had repeatedly tried to get in through the front door. You know, the son who always checks up on the place when you guys are gone. He then saw the boy head around to the side gate and attempt to open it before heading back to his car and driving away. This would have never been all well and good except for one minor detail. I have two brothers. Both of them were at the cabin, and neither of them drives a silver car. No other suspicious events have occurred since, and that was over 6 months ago. However, I am still petrified to spend too much time alone at my parents' place.